Comme tu étais une jaune qui ne parlait pas, il a dit impossible que tu puisses écrire. Ils ne veulent pas de toi. Ils ne te connaissent pas. Ils n'ont pas envie de te connaître. T'es une poupée chinoise parfaite. T'es tellement exotique. Les regards, c'est pas mal, même palpitant. Tu es consciente que c'est hypocrite.
You waking to you as bodies, as oppositional territory.
Tu peux remplir ton corps de n'importe
Mình có thể bỏ bất cứ cái gì vào cơ thể của mình cũng được. Thật ra chỉ có một mét vuông nhà thôi. Chỉ sống có thể
superposé. Tu le dis, c'est lui ou c'est moi. Tu te demandes qui, finalement, gagnera la mort de ta mère.
em nhìn thấy con đường đầy rác rến và tự hỏi là rác rưởi
Tu vois la rue d'aujourd'hui et te demandes ce que ça veut dire de chère maman, arrête de culpabiliser. Toi, tu m'as aidé.
trong sự mệt mỏi đó em đã chịu sự
Tu te demandes jusqu'où tu vas descendre, à quel point la terre te tiendra, trahie encore une fois de plus par notre
và em đã thấy cách đàn ông nhìn em và rồi thì nhìn theo
tu as vu la manière dont les hommes te regardent. Puis regarde l'homme qui t'a introduit.
Stating, I'm like an eagle, you see.
Tu te souviens de ces vers.
em đã
Tu
ghi
les as
nhớ
collectionnés
câu
comme
này
du verre
và
de
sưu
mer
tầm
dans
chúng
un
như những mặt tự tinh biển để ở trong cái tình thơ này.
A rock inside your throat,
une pierre dans ta gorge. Chaque fois que tu prends le désir pour de la
Cục đá trong cổ em nổi lên mỗi khi em hiểu lầm sự thèm muốn với tình yêu.
you didn't hear that,
Tu n'as pas entendu ça.
you didn't see that,
Tu ne l'as pas vu, oublie-le.
just forget about it.
Lần đầu tiên bạn cảm thấy được yêu là khi nào?
Quelle est la première fois où vous vous êtes senti aimé?
It's the first time you felt loved.
Chê yêu, em đã không hề biết điều đó.
Chère maman,
Còn bé thơ.
All these accidents that happen follow the dot. Coincidence makes sense only with you. You don't have to speak. I feel emotional landscapes. They pass on me. The riddle gets solved, and you push me up to this state of emergency. How beautiful to be state of emergency is where I want to be. All that no one sees, you see what's inside of me. Every nerve that hurts, you heal deep inside of me. Ooh, you don't have to speak. I feel emotional landscape. gets out and you push me up to this state of emergency. How beautiful to be state of emergency is where I want to be. State of emergency. How beautiful to be. Emotional landscapes, they pass on me. The little gets out, and you push me up to this state of emergency. How beautiful to be state of emergency is where I want to be. State of emergency. How beautiful to be. State of emergency.
Welcome everyone back to Accented Dialogues in Diaspora, hosted by the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network. My name is Khoi Nguyen. I'm the producer for the show and one of the MCs for the show. And if y'all could, please give it up for our in-house DJ Puzzle. Please show him some love in the chat if you can. Dropping his socials, his Venmo, and also where you can find DVAN's SoundCloud, where you can check out Heavy Accents, which is an Accented sponsored mixtape series created by DJ Puzzle. So thank you so much, DJ Puzzle, for sharing your musical stylings from us. You'll be able to hear from DJ Puzzle again later during our cocktail break. To welcome you all to the show and to DVAN, the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network believes in the empowerment of Vietnamese and Southeast Asian diasporic voices around the world. That the stories, imaginaries, and poetics of a thriving Vietnamese diaspora can unite our global community. Our mission is to celebrate and foster diasporic Vietnamese voices, and we present nonfiction, fiction, and poetry to empower Vietnamese artists in the diaspora and to promote and dialogue within our community and with others. Our complex and diverse stories must be championed and passed on to current and future generations. We are refugees, we are immigrants, survivors, and descendants, and our stories must be heard. Again, welcome to this episode of Accented Dialogues in Diaspora with special guest host, She Who Has No Masters, on their exhibit Would That, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. To give you all a brief rundown of where we're currently at with the Accented show, right? The Accented series has been a response to the coronavirus pandemic, right? To be able to provide a space for Southeast Asian and Viet cultural producers to gather in conversation about their work, their stories, their passions, their inspirations, and what they're up to, what they've been up to in quarantine, right? We began as an author talk series with Nguyen Phan Quay Mai, author of The Mountains Sing. Then we moved to having the first episode of Accented with Phuc Trang, the author of Saigon. We then presented a show on Vietnamese representation on screen and behind the scenes with folks like Bao Nguyen, Viet Nguyen, Jenny Lê, and Q Jin. Then on to Vietnamese American art, activism, and advocacy with Massachusetts State Representative Trâm Nguyen, Dr. Duong Nguyen, and Thi Bui. Then we had a rock star on, Thao Nguyen, from Thao and the Get Down, Stay Down. And our most recent show on Southeast Asian food and festivity with Mark Padung Pat, Chef Thu David Phu, and Aaron O'Brien, hosted by Viet Thanh Nguyen. This installation of Accented, however, will be hosted by the She Who Has No Masters Collective and centers around the collective's ongoing virtual exhibit that you can check out now. And we'll drop a link for you all in the chat, in collaboration with the Salt Lake City Community College and the George S. and Dolores Dore Eccles Art Gallery. to talk a little bit more and to take over my responsibilities as host today for the show are members of the She Who Has No Masters Collective. And I'll start by introducing Dao Strom to tell you a little bit about the She Who Has No Masters Collective. Dao Strom is the author of the poetry collection Instrument and its musical companion piece, Traveler's Ode, out this fall on phonograph editions and Antiquated Future Records. Formerly editor of Diacritics, she is the founder of two collaborative, let me take a quick step back. Her bilingual poetry art book, You Will Always Be From Somewhere Else, published by Ajar Press in 2018, was a finalist for the 2019 Firecracker Award. She is also the author of an experimental memoir, We Were Meant to Be a Gentle People, and song cycle East West, and two books of fiction. Formerly the editor of Diacritics, she is the co-founder of two collaborative art projects, She Who Has No Masters and D Canon. So please, you all give it up for Dao Strom.
Beneath still water, there's a strong undertow. The surface.
Thanks, Philip. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to DVAN for having us on here, and of course thank you to DJ Puzzle for the intro. I'm going to just start by saying a little bit about She Who Has No Masters and what we're about. If you're not familiar with us, we are a collective of Vietnamese women writers and artists, and we work in a collaborative format. So we collaborate with each other to create poetry, which actually sits more at the intersection of poetry and art. And it's a loose collective that actually contains a number of people. And we're going to be talking about a poetry and art exhibit that we have currently running now. And so I'll say more about that and say more about who's involved in it. And for this episode of Accented, we have 4 of us from the collective here to talk about the exhibit and just to talk about poetry and art in general. So I'll go ahead and introduce Diana, and can we have everybody else come up on the screen also? So I'll start off by introducing Diana Khoi Nguyen, who is the co-curator of the exhibit that we'll be talking about. A poet and multimedia artist, Diana Khoi Nguyen is the author of Ghost of, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. A Kundiman Fellow, she is core faculty in the Randolph College Low Residency MFA and an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Here's Diana.
That song always makes me want to feel like a Muppet. I have the great pleasure of introducing Khi Nao, who is the author of 4 poetry collections, Human Tetris, Sheep Machine, Umbilical Hospital, and The Old Philosopher. Her work includes poetry, fiction, film, and cross-genre collaboration. Please welcome Khi Nao.
I have the honor of introducing Sophia Terazawa. She's the author of 2 chapbooks, I Am Not a War, from Essay Press, and Correspondent Medley from Factory Hollow Press. Her favorite color is purple. So welcome, Sophia.
So thought we would start off by talking about why we're all gathered here. And if you notice, we're all wearing matching outfits too. So we'll talk more about the themes. The topic of the show is the intersection of poetry and art. And She Who Has No Masters has an exhibit that is currently open at the George and Dolores Eccles Art Gallery in Salt Lake Community College. And Salt Lake Community College is a co-presenter of this episode of Accented too. The exhibit is called She Who Has No Masters Would That. And we collaborated on poetry and art, image text poems, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are 4 of us here and we've introduced ourselves, but there are actually 14 voices that are in the exhibit, and it's different than a group show. It's not a group art exhibit. It's an exhibit of She Who Has No Masters, and that's sort of important for us, that we kind of come together as like a collective entity creating a body of work that is, you know, cohesive in its own way, but contains these multiple voices. And that's a basic overview of the exhibit. And there are some common themes, which we'll talk about more specifically. But we wanted to start out by giving a virtual tour of the exhibit. And Diana is going to lead us through that. So you can get a sense of what it looks like. And this link is going to be available next week officially, like on the website, but we're going to give a little preview of it now. And for people who are in Salt Lake City, of course, they can visit it, and hopefully maybe some people have. And yeah, let me start there.
Thank you, Dao, for introducing the collective. I want to also specifically thank Danielle Susie Ditmore for installing the show physically for us. We mailed her supplies. I think originally this show was slated to go in March before the pandemic really reared its head. And everything really kind of shifted, and I didn't even think that the show would even happen anymore, which was fine. I mean, fine, because like I got to work with Dao and She Who Has No Masters. So thank you so much, Danielle. It's so I just wanted to say that before I show you the actual space, so you have an idea too of the labor that goes into setting it up, right? Because I mean, most of us are, if we're lucky, get to work from home. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and I'll kind of walk you through it, and I'll talk you, yeah, I'll talk awkwardly as I virtually walk. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the space, and here along the walls, there are some bodied text images. And so they appear kind of ghostly, and that's meant to be intentional. They could be read as kind of from behind as you're walking outside, or you might not notice it right away when you enter into the gallery. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then up here, we have set up the pieces from the collective, and they've been framed on frames that you would find in a house, in a kind of, I don't know, the houses that I grew up spending time and eating jaya in, which is to say, you know, family photos, kind of haphazard, oops, oh shit. Sorry, I accidentally like activated my screensaver. Yeah, and then they're meant to just kind of hang the way that family photos might hang. So there's body text images. You'll notice actually that in some of the photographs, parts of the photograph has actually been excised, sometimes with an X-Acto knife, sometimes with scissors, and each of these have been done by the artist themselves in actually a virtual Zoom session, which we can talk about too. So it wasn't alone, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of why that happened. So I'll turn the corner here. I'll try to go slow because I don't want to do a Blair Witch kind of walk through here. So you can kind of see another body text up there. So as you walk through, you'll see text bodies, which kind of echo photographed bodies from another wall. And that's also meant to be intentional, to think about a kind of how an image might stay in our mind and how it kind of maps onto another space when we move to another area of a room or a house or environment. I also kind of like how the glare of what's behind through the windows of the gallery. So we also get Salt Lake City kind of mapped onto this project as well, which I think is quite appropriate when we think about the diaspora and the layers of place and how art and visual art, literary art overlaps with place and the people who behold it and the spaces that it occupies. Okay. I'll move a little further down here and I'll let Dao talk about the video that's playing on repeat.
Yeah, so this video was actually created in, well, the source of it was from 2017 when members of the collective of She Who Has No Masters did a retreat, a writing retreat in Corsica, France. And we spent time together. We spent 10 days together in a house in Corsica, France. And it was actually, there were 9 of us at that gathering. And it was the first time that some of us were meeting and collaborating in person, and we did writing exercises together. And the video, you can't really see it in this layout, but it's a video that contains text. And the name of the video is Love, Object, Treason. And those were the themes that we were exploring with this poem. And the text was written in English, but some of it was written in French. And we translated it into French and Vietnamese. So the video is technically, you see horizontal scrolling text in 3 languages. And there's images of water and there's some ambient sound. And that's, I believe that's running on a loop in the exhibit space. Yeah.
And because we are in the time of COVID-19, when you enter, if you're there in Salt Lake City, you can scan the QR code and it pulls up a pamphlet, which I think we will drop the exhibit pamphlet. I'm not even sure I'm saying that word right. It's too many P's and H's. Pamphlet, there we go. Pamphlet into the chat so you can kind of read it as well and see the titles of all the pieces and to read a little bit more about the impetus kind of driving this exhibit. Yeah, so that's the tour. I'll end the screen sharing and stay tuned. We'll also drop a link into the chat for the actual exhibit itself, which is where you'll find the updated, the virtual tour early next week. Yeah, thank you for walking with me through it together. It's kind of nice.
Thanks, Diana. And I think we're going to move on to a slideshow now. And just to give sort of an agenda of our meeting or our event structure here, we're going to look at some slides so you'll get to see the poems a little more closely. And then we'll talk about them a little bit, and then we'll each actually read a little bit. So you'll hear our voices, each poet's voices who is here. And yeah. So this first image is actually from another member of the collective, and it's in the exhibit. This is Isabelle Thuy Pelaud. And just to give you a sense of what we started with, we started with themes of bodies, silences, and hungers, and we had that open to interpretation, as in you can interpret hunger in a lot of different ways. So, you know, it could be a physical hunger, it could be emotional, can be really abstract. When we talk about themes of the diaspora, there's, you know, hunger can be equated with silences and losses. And so we were playing with that, and that was what we gave to the collective, everybody who was invited into this process. And so this is a photo that Isabelle, people chose photos. We asked for self-portraits, I believe, or just portraits that were personal and resonated. And then had this idea of turning those figures into poems. So replacing the image of the figure with text. And these are words from Isabelle. And we titled a lot of these poems just sort of based on the first line of that appears. So this one is, "Once upon a time, her story does not repeat." And I think the next one we're going to see is from Julie T. Underhill, and it's also another member of our collective. Isabelle and Julie are both founding members of the collective, and Isabelle is the executive director of DVAN, so I'm sure people know who she is. And this is a photo that Julie sent, and obviously it's from the ocean. And this is the body abstracted. And this is "Nearly every night I dream of monsters in my house." And for this photograph, this is a photograph from my childhood, and it's a photograph of me and my sister. And this is something that is, yeah, I just chose this. This resonates. I've used it in other work that I've done, hybrid work. And this is a photo that for me really kind of shows a sense of humor of my parents, and my father especially. There's a lot behind that, but I'll just go into I'll read a few lines from this poem. So, we are born into colonies even after the time of colonies. Perpetuated beliefs about sustenance and resources. You waking to you as body, as oppositional territory. Bodies polarize, or bodies magnetize. But they, those others, would burn the skin and blow holes in the shapes of new bellies, aberrant cavities, in order to get down, get through to her vitals. The archetype of the prostitute, my country. And when you are prone by some degree of nature to not speaking, it can be an unknown, understandably, what your voice is supposed to sound like, maybe even to yourself. So maybe that is part of why I made my voice a vessel for a time. We should want for more innocence for our children. And I feel like I'll just read from this one, and I'll move on to who's next so we can hear some more voices. I think the next poem will be Diana.
Thank you, Dao. I got swept up in your voice. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with that text and image. It's wonderful to feel it embodied, even if through a virtual space. Okay, this is a portrait of my family, which hung in my family's house. And so content warning, and talk about suicide here. 2 years before he committed suicide, at the age of 24, my brother cut himself out of the family photographs in the middle of the night and then put the pictures all back up. And a couple years ago, maybe more like, yeah, I think it was a couple years ago, I actually was in Vietnam in December, in the days leading up to the anniversary of his death. And I found myself revisiting these photographs and spending a lot of time thinking about the things that he left in the photograph. He left his shoes. You can see, it's really hard to see, but it's his dress shirt, his white dress shirt here that he wore to my uncle's wedding. So I think a lot about what remains in the photograph, or also like what the photograph communicates that we don't always capture at first glance. So on the next slide, I began to kind of try to capture narratives of family members, including a younger version of myself from the 90s, right? None of us are these people anymore, and there's somebody who's not here. So I'm just gonna read two bodies. I'm just gonna read my father's body, and I'll read my mother's body, because why not? My parents. Okay. He who shoots the photograph has been here all along, standing there beside us in the nick of time, having arrived just after triggering the clock. One solitude stands beside others, capturing this moment for posterity. For himself, a man named Sung, whose son removed himself from frames, cutting into them and all around. Two clocks nicking the wire, the vanishing wick. Quick, everyone say. The love of my life, she wrote to nobody, no one, not even herself. Before the camera, she is smiling, using her finger as a knife. The lengths she'll go to get them to straighten, to get her children to listen. How it is a battle, what she has done, what she has to do. It is emptiness inside that holds what she wants. And then the next slide will just kind of show what happens when I decide to move the text bodies into a portrait, and how the overlapped bodies generate a body, but of course reveal continuing the body that's not there. Thank you for listening, and also thank you for your very kind sentiments in the chat. I very much appreciate you. It always feels really vulnerable to share this, so thank you. And in a way, I feel like I get to honor my brother, so it's quite nice. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you to Dao for your poems. I just want to, I don't know, in a presentation about silence, I kind of am tempted to have a moment of silence just to thank you. I like to think of silence as a way to show gratitude and acknowledgement of time passing. So thank you both for your time, and thank you everybody. So this photo, I wanted to approach it really playfully. I struggled when Dao approached me about this project to pick a photo with my family in it. And at the time, I was thinking a lot about self-portraiture and also about quarantine. So I took this photo during quarantine, and you can see I had an assistant here who helped me with that. And I'll show you a little inspiration behind it. So the inspiration behind this photo has been another image. This is a painting by the Japanese Edo period painter around the 1700s, Ito Jakuchu. And the title of this painting is Two Gibbons Reaching for the Moon. It's the painting of a mother gibbon, which is an ape, holding on to the arm of her replica, a baby gibbon. And the premise is that they're both reaching for an invisible moon that's reflected in the water, the paradox being that they're essentially reaching for something that's not real. And so I think a lot about that with my poetry. And I think with the next slide, or the next few slides, you can probably see what I've been thinking about. So this is supposed to be inspired by the shape of the main river in Vietnam, the Mother Mekong. And I'll just read the text on the right. Our mother's red begonia, our DMZ perfumed, waters singing. And then I think on the next slide, you'll see my portrait with Panda. And I'll go ahead and read this for you guys. Torn from limb and fruit, an evergreen beginning. Anon, the arrows fly. Our turquoise dream between the crested ape remains mid-air, forced from time. An airborne paw Laughtered, past the bells of precipice, how the shapeless dreams burning, she who leaps into the water, the weight to which mistakes a body for its enemy, skinless streams made sweet, I hold in my paw, our paw, a plume, mercy, help us, shimmering and boned, a people forced into their rivers. Thanks, guys.
I am so moved by everyone's voices, and I'm going to talk about this image. I believe it was chosen for me because I don't think I chose this. And so my family have always been very private about their public photographs. So they often censor me from publishing anything about our family. So there are a lot of times when I wanted to post something very beautiful that is happening in my family, and all my sisters, and primarily my sisters, they said no. So it looks like on my Instagram that it's only my mother and me, but that's not true, you know. Anyway, this one is taken by Tanya Safras, my best friend, when we were traveling to New Mexico to visit the White Sand. And she took this picture of me wearing in white. The shirt was given to me by C.D. Wright, the poet, before she passed away in her sleep. And so there's a lot of death theme, and white in Vietnamese is this color for death. So, and for mourning and grief. And so it seems very fitting that this photo was kindly and thoughtfully chosen by whomever that was chosen for me. So I thank you. I can read to you my first memory of hunger. And then I don't know if, I guess the next image you can see, but I'll read a brief passage from it, just not all. My first memory of hunger, which is related to my memory of food, is the memory of my mother's hunger. When we lived in Vietnam, my parents devoted a large part of their fiscal success on escaping Vietnam. With each failed attempt, my parents came back to our village in Long Khanh to rebuild penniless. One time amongst many times, I'm sure, after being captured and shipped home, my mother and my siblings sat in our foodless home with French windows and doors and rocked our bodies back and forth while we stared at the vacantness of our kitchen and our bare walls. My mother was too ashamed of our poverty to ask for food so we all huddled together on that cold concrete floor, staring at the French windows and studying the conflicting shadows on the room generated by the motion of light when it became night. My aunt, who suspected that we were hungry, came running from my grandmother's grapevine with a hot pot of freshly sauteed pork and fish sauce, and she came knocking on my mother's vacant home calling, "Nhà ơi, mở cửa cho em, nhà ơi." My mother, our pride and sadness and hopelessness, shut all the French shutters and begged us not to make a sound. I remember my aunt begging my mother to open the door. I wonder when my aunt asked my mother to open the door, did she mean a little door or a conceptual door or a spiritual door? I don't remember my mother opening the door or the gesture of it, but I do remember my aunt sitting on the cold floor with us as she served each one of us pork sauté in fish sauce. I'll just stop there. And that's just a body text image from the cutout from the desert.
So thank you, Vi and Sophia and Diana. Do we want to move into talking about the exhibit and the themes of this exhibit? And maybe we can elaborate on the process. Do you want to, I can't hear you, Diana. Did you speak?
Oh yeah, I think I'm still soaking in the moment, you know, sometimes the words move through V and then they move through me, you know? So thank you. And I just wanted to honor that movement. But I guess we can maybe pick up that I got hungry, like listening to V talk, and I could almost smell the smell of pork with fish sauce, you know, like hitting against the wok or even just like a frying pan. And I was struck by so much in the pieces. There's a lot of grief and longing, and I'm curious if others are willing to share or talk about how the themes that we were all tasked to think about, how you were thinking about in your own work, in thinking about maybe even on a craft level too, composition, you know, like, did you sit with the photograph as you were typing? Were you literally like, you know, how does ritual play into, you know, the embodiment practice of writing with image? I don't know about you all, but I was not taught to do anything with image when I studied poetry. So yeah, I guess I just brought up a lot of stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about, but just, you know, what sparks?
No, thank you, Diana. Those are a lot of great questions. I feel like the collective has talked about hunger in bodies like at other times, so it's sort of natural that this is a theme that came up and that's recurring. I guess yeah. Do you want to, Vi, or Sophia, do you want to address sort of how you responded to the prompt when you first heard it?
Sure. Well, I first want to respond to V's poem, and thinking back to your comment, Diana, about hunger. I also think about sound, how sound was so prevalent. Just the thinking about the sound of food or the sound that other people make, and just I don't speak Vietnamese. I didn't grow up speaking Vietnamese. And so for me, whenever I do hear Vietnamese, I feel that hunger. I don't know about you, Dao or Diana, but I kind of felt a secondhand hunger with V's poem. And so then to answer the question about the cutting process or the photo selection process, for me, I was really fascinated by the prompt of hunger, in that I think about the memory also of scent. And that's why when I was writing this poem, I was thinking about the scent of roses and the scent of mud. And because of that, I'm thinking about all of these images that I can't see, that I don't have in my memory because they're not a part of my memory. And so when I create an image, for me, that creates a sense of maybe smell or sounds coming back to me, hence the visual poetry that I try to work towards. I want to maybe activate something visual, kind of back to the painting here. Like with this, there's the invisible image and maybe an invisible scent, like the scent of water or the scent of the night. So I hope that answers the question, Dao. Thank you so much for asking it.
Yeah,
I've always correlate hunger or the landscape of whiteness, especially when it comes to mourning, as very sexual, I think. My mother has a very negative relationship with fish sauce. She thinks it's not really good for dating, and so she always like whenever she leaves the house, she says I would prepare her this fishy dish for her to go on her date, and she said, I'm going to have to not eat for 5 days before and after the date due to this fish sauce. So she says, because she is under the impression that white men are not into kissing fish sauce, which I think, which is really counterintuitive, because I think if they go down on her, I'm sure there is more fish content there than they would ever imagine. And so sexuality and fish sauce and the image that I was chosen all linked to this full metaphor of how mourning, sex, and fish sauce all connected. And I think when I took the razor to the razor to cut out, I think I'm cutting out more than just hunger or whiteness. I'm also cutting out the fish that is embodied in that whiteness and the smell of it. I'm actually silencing it a little bit, and also omitting that in the way that my mother, each time she goes on a date, omits that fish smell in order to enter the erotic arena. And so I think it's pertinent in that sense that I feel that white sand and white desert, which takes place in New Mexico places, embody that as a unification of all these things that feels very Vietnamese and Vietnam, and yet at the same time is dislocated. It's like been cut away into another landscape that completely doesn't make sense, you know? Why would you cut fish sauce out in a country that is not predominantly water-based, you know? Especially in New Mexico and Las Vegas, which is very desert-based.
I guess I think about like when we approached the photo cutting, we could talk about that exercise, which we came together for. Like a lot of this was done, a lot of the collaboration was done remotely and through, you know, sending in, sharing a Google Doc, and then Diana and I worked together to assemble the poems, and actually I have to thank everyone in the collective really for trusting us with their words, being willing to send their writing and letting us also select lines from it and, you know, shape them into these different shaped poems than they were on the page. Part of what's really lovely about this collective is how much trust and openness there is in the collaborative process. But we did come together over Zoom for a photo cutting process, which Diana can talk about a little bit since she led us through it. And I thought about, like, it is an interesting process to think about cutting some part of ourselves out of a photo, or you know, or cutting the place out or something. And I guess when I came to my photo, I felt I didn't really want to cut my sister and my faces out. And I ended up focusing on like the weapons that we were holding, which for me is a lot to do with really emotional hunger, like things that were closed down in my growing up, you know, in order to, you know, project strength or project, you know, control. So that's sort of how I approached the photo cutting. But maybe Diana, you could back up and talk about what that was.
That's a wonderful segue, Dao. It's a little bit of context. Folks in the collective knew the story about my brother, and I wanted to change the kind of negative valency that it cast over my family and over me, which is to say, I was really struck in listening to initially, like when Sophia was talking and V, but I think V, you said something about like, you wanted to silence it in a minute, right? That there's an agency in doing that. And I was interested in the idea of cutting out as a kind of healing practice as well, and less a precursor to self-harm, right? So a kind of act of resistance against not being here, not being alive. So when I did but it's also like so sensitive. It's so scary to like mar the archive, right? So that on itself is kind of terrifying. And I thought we might facilitate as a kind of way, like, what can we gift to ourselves, right? We're hungry for so many different things that we didn't receive. When I look at the photograph of myself and my sister, I don't know, I think we're 7 and 5. We were hungry for love. We were hungry for affection. We didn't have it, you know? My sister and I went through 3 days of wardrobe changes to figure out what we had to wear for that stupid wedding that we didn't care about. And never a nice thing was said. It was just about how we had to appear. So when I cut my sister and I out, I wanted to remove us from those parents. I love those parents. And I want to talk too about like family censorship, which you brought up, but like, it's also like, I wanted to bring those 2 children to safety. And so sometimes cutting into the archive is a way to rewrite a kind of past for yourself, right? Which is restorative, which is a way of gifting and feeding yourself in that hunger that nobody else can fill. I think, I don't know. So that's where I was kind of thinking and going.
I was wondering if I could respond to that. That resonates with me so much. Talking about the kind of sustenance that we want from our parents, but we might not have gotten, not to their fault at all. And I really quickly want to say hi to my mom, who's, I think, watching this right now. And hello to all the moms. Mom, I'm here. There are women like me who exist. It's not just white people who write poetry. I also do it in this country. And I think about this a lot too, because I've never really invited my mom to poetry events for that reason of feeling afraid that I would like out her in a way that I don't intend to. And I think more now to the effect of figuring out how to feed my mom back, or how can I use language to speak in her language, even though it's through English. And that is a form of feeding, and it's a form of nurturing. And I'm curious to see how she will respond. And it's almost like, I just think of this image of like the baby mother who vomits her food. And it's just, but it's like, this is, my mom's like covering her face right now. Like, why, Sophia, do you have to bring this up? But I think about this act of like tender word vomit and tender, but it's like from an act of love. And, you know, whatever comes out might be jumbled, but it's my hope that maybe through the jumble, the sentiment can be picked up. And I think for me, it's not really about language, and it's not about displaying the language. And I think it goes back to answering your question, Dao and Diana, about the purpose of cutting out, because it shows that the words in themselves aren't as important here. It's the shape that the words take, which is the cadence, or it's the texture, and it's the outline, it's the emotion, it's the performance. And for me, I'm really appreciative of that space. And I was wondering if I could ask you all a question too. Speaking of shape, I think also about home and about families. And my question for you all is, how do you imagine your poetry taking shape in 30 years? Like, is your poetry also a mother shape, or is it a home shape? For me, it's a castle. I imagine getting myself a big castle and then putting my mom in the biggest room in that castle. Mom, I'm working on it. So what about you guys? What do you see your poetry as in the future?
I love the idea of bringing in poetry as a character that, of course, also ages and morphs. Wow. So I'm really struck by this question, and also like 30 years is very specific. There is a Japanese photographer who I think is based out of New York City, and I love this series that she does. It's called I Used to Be You. She was walking in Brooklyn and saw a wig and instantly recognized her hair 30 years from now, and then bought it, put it on, and then decided like to put on latex makeup. So she tried to imagine herself 30 years into the future, and then did a series of like photographs called I Used to Be You. And so there was this kind of uncanny / radical empathy thing where she was like moving forward, but also like communing with her future self. So I'll put a link to that, because I just like, I think about that all the time. So in terms of poetry in 30 years, I don't know. I think it takes for me probably analogous to aging rituals and families. I think about my grandmother, my Bawai, right now, and how she recently was spending part of the pandemic in my parents' home. And the last time I saw them, it was just like 3 generations together. That in poetry too, there is a kind of multi-generational capture, whether or not we know it, right? Whether it's through like how we say a phrase or how we look at a thing. And so I see myself probably maybe looking more like my mother, and my mother more like my grandmother, which is so complicated too, right? Who takes care of whom? And also like poetry has to be attended to. I don't know if this made any sense, but it's just like, but just the analogy of like, I don't know, like, yeah, documenting, having proof of the time that has passed, you know, with all the gray hairs, I guess. Okay, I'm gonna stop because I don't know where my brain went.
It's beautiful.
Love it.
I think my short answer, and the first thing that came to my mind was a song, but I think it's like I can't really locate, you know, I can be more literal about it, but maybe it's like my aspiration with poetry is music, but I mean, I'm talking about music in a kind of metaphorical way, and then just also something that's like, you know, non-physical and abstract, as in like my other thought was a bird. So maybe I'm just like trying to get free of some of the things that are, you know, binding.
When I was in Vietnam, I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. There was, and my grandmother, we all lived together, my grandmother, my mother, my father, all of us into this like, these 3 houses that are in an L shape, and there would be a grapevine between, situated behind that L shape. And there's an alley that walks out, and then you can, out that alley, you can see the well in which it holds water. And I used to like jump and dance with my brother while the rain comes down. And because rain in Vietnam, it floods, when it floods, everything floats up. And I was thinking that if my work were to live as long as it does, I hope it lives at the bottom of a well, so that when someone draws the water up, and instead of just water, it would be my poem in the bucket in their hand, and they would be drinking it. And I would think that, you know, like it has all that long khăn core of the muds and the coconut trees and the banana leaves and these filaments from the water moving through, and then here is just lifting up to the surface. It even doesn't have to be my name on it, like Khi Nao. It just could be just like one of my poems just float up. from surviving the devastation of being an expatriate, but also the devastation of just moving completely to another country and appearing on the other hand of reality, on the other, like folding time into halves, you know, and reappearing somewhere else from having existing somewhere here.
Beautiful. So we have a little time check as far, are we moving into, I think we're moving to a break soon. I'm sorry, this is a terrible transition, but thank you for these voices. We are still coming back, and I think we're taking questions also. I want to just mention that this is the first episode of Accented that is hosted by She Who Has No Masters, and there are going to be future ones. There are other members in this collective, so you won't always see the same faces, and that's part of our goal with this, just to kind of shake up the paradigm of hierarchies and single personalities. There isn't a single host for this part of Accented. There will be different She Who Has No Masters members talking about different genres or different topics, and so just to mention that. And I think that we're going to take a break. Is that right, Philip? And then we're going to take questions.
Yes, for sure. So take this time. I'm going to queue up DJ Puzzle for our cocktail break. Usually this is when we get a refill. Hopefully you all are enjoying this candid, vulnerable conversation. We also encourage you all to engage in the space that we're cultivating and crafting here on Zoom. On Zoom, we have this Q&A function that you can directly drop Q&A there during our live Q&A session right after the cocktail break. So sit tight, use the restroom if you need to, grab a refill, and we will be back in about 8 minutes, right? Thank you all so much. And with that, DJ Puzzle. Bump it, DJ Puzzle.
Stay. Taking care of you, be given love. You have to trust it, maybe not from these sources. You have poured your, maybe not from the directions you are staring at. Trust your head around. It's all around you. All is full of love. All around you. You just ain't receiving. Your phone is off the hook. Your doors all shut. back to my anatomy. Oh, warrior. Oh, warrior.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone, to Accented Dialogues in Diaspora. Tonight, hosted by the She Who Has No Masters Collective. I'm just gonna say, I don't know if y'all did, but shout outs to DJ Puzzle and cheers to DJ Puzzle for being such an amazing and incredible DJ, just getting the vibe right. I'd also like to add, as we segue on out, is check out DJ Puzzle on Instagram and on Venmo. Check at PU22L3, and also on the DVAN SoundCloud at bit.ly/heavyaccents2 if you want to check out some of the mixes that have been inspired by previous guests that we've had on the show. So please show DJ Puzzle some love. We'll also drop the set list tonight if you're interested in what kind of music that we've been jamming out to right in between our conversation. Before we get to the Q&A, I'm also just going to say that I feel like as we talk about hunger, and as we talk about bodies, and we talk about trauma and the relationship between us and the previous generation and what kind of legacies we leave for the next, I think a lot about what it felt like to be talking about some of these things when I had the opportunity to with my father, my parents, my aunts and uncles. It would always be over a Heineken or some Hennessy. So I hope that you all are imbibing too, and you're joining us in accented spirit, right? So before we move on to the Q&A, we just have some shout outs to give. First, to Diacritics, the Diacritics blog, which is a blog that showcases art, literature, and stories from writers, artists, and culture makers of the Vietnamese and Southeast Asian diaspora on and from all shores. Diacritics was initiated by writers with roots in Vietnam. However, they recognize that our Vietnamese roots and stories spill into, draw from, commingle with, and do not exist without other countries' stories, just as our motherland's borders touch other borders. And so what the Diacritics blog is that it makes spaces for voices and stories from all of the Southeast Asian diaspora and may extend into the Asian diaspora and or address current diasporic concerns at large. And they aim to write about diasporic matters that are relevant, both of now and of the past, right? So each accented show, we do a book spotlight. Tonight's book spotlight is Fantasy by Kim An Schreiber. And from the Diacritics editors, part film criticism, part narrative prose, and part performance, Fantasy by Kim An Schreiber is unlike any book you've read before. What starts as a close reading of Nobuhiko Obayashi's horror film House becomes an exploration of a mother-daughter relationship, the idea of not being Vietnamese enough while growing up biracial, and the ways our personal histories haunt us. Hard to describe, yet impossible to put down, this cross-genre novel manages to be both avant-garde and emotionally resonant, and are perfect for readers of folks from the She Who Has No Masters Collective. So please check out the diacritics.org blog and Fantasy by Kim An Schreiber. I also want to do a quick shout out to Eastwind Books of Berkeley, our bookstore partner who has partnered with us for each Accented Dialogues in Diaspora show. You can visit them on asiabookcenter.com to get your copies of all of the works from our guests today, and also for the book spotlight. Please check them out. Here's their information. And also they have a couple of events that will be going on. They'll be having a Chinatown Pretty Book Talk tomorrow, Saturday, October 17th at 1 p.m. PST on Zoom. You can RSVP at the link there. We'll also drop it in the chat. They also have a book club, and this month they're reading Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong. So please check that out. You can get a copy of Minor Feelings from Eastwind. And then Saturday, November 7th at 2 p.m. Will be Children's Storytime, Awesome Asian Americans with Oliver Chin, a reading. So please support our bookstore partner as they have supported us through these accented shows so far. And with that, I'd like to bring back our panelists from the She Who Has No Masters Collective to do a little bit of a Q&A. If y'all could, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the screen share. So y'all covered a lot, and we have some very intriguing questions from the audience. If audience members would like to continue to drop their questions in the Q&A function, please go on right ahead. I'll start with a question from someone who's actually been the inspiration for the Accented show, right? Nguyen Phan Khoi Mai, author of The Mountain Sings. She asks, each of you have written about your own trauma. How have you taken care of yourself during this process? What is your advice for writers who need to dig deep into the trauma of themselves and their families to be able to find healing or processes of healing?
Breathe.
Get a panda.
Go ahead.
Get a panda.
Maybe I bring up my therapist too much, but Friday is my therapy day. She said something really fascinating today specifically, which is you have to make sure you're in a space where you're strong, which is another way of saying support systems in place, but also that you feel okay, right? Not every day is a day to dive into trauma, you know? For me, myself specifically, I have an intro and outro ritual to help me to prepare me to enter and to extract me from it, because sometimes I worry I'll get stuck in that space and I become a child again who is a victim and not a survivor. And so I think it's really important. I didn't know that I needed to do that until it was too late the first time, and I felt destroyed, right? So I guess that if I could offer that, to find ways of strength to prepare yourself for the before and the after, you know. But I'm curious, I really want to know what the others have to say.
I feel like I don't have a simple answer for that. Sometimes I don't do a very good job of it, I would say. And then sometimes it's such a, like I think about these things constantly, and I've thought about them like constantly for decades, that it's, you know, it's kind of normal for me. But at the same time, I think that I find pleasure in writing also. I find pleasure in the process of deep thinking and feeling. So maybe there's something in that to value, and to not, or to be willing to sit with, I guess. I think of, like, you know, sitting with it, sitting with suffering. That's like the, you know, the definition of the word compassion. I think that's maybe that's being able to do that is part of it. And being patient with yourself, as in, like, it doesn't have to feel okay all the time. And I think that what I've come out of it is, like, I've been wrestling with these sort of topics and this, you know, for you know, a lot of years, for decades really. And it's a really long process, as in, like, writing one book isn't going to heal you, or like one return trip to Vietnam isn't going to sort of like heal the divides and fix everything. And so maybe what I've arrived at for myself is this, you know, conclusion that it's kind of okay to be in this process, and that it might take a long time. And yeah, like that. And then, of course, reading other people's writing, finding that other people are, I love poets, I love writers for the vulnerability and the depth that they're willing to go to. And that's, you know, I think I spend time communing with those types of people, so that helps.
I guess I can try to answer this a little bit. One is more practical and the other one is more how to handle like unfairness, resentment that's built up in your system for so long. I believe in buying ginger, and if you have an oven, you should roast it, like slice them, like really thinly slice them, and then roast them to a small oven, and then put it in your tea or whatever you drink, or whiskey or whatever drink that you're drinking, and just let the roast, the aroma of the roast, because I think ginger cures stomach ache. Now, when I think of trauma, I think immediately right into the stomach, like the gut takes the most impact. So from a practical standpoint, just having ginger, even if you can't psychologically or emotionally take care of yourself, at least from a physical standpoint, your stomach can hold up. So I do recommend that from just for anything really, whether it's stomach ache or trauma from like being a boat person, witnessing depravity and pirates and whatnot. All those can easily be solved with a practical thing such as ginger. On a less practical note, I used to be so angry when I worked at this company for 5-6 years, and everyone was so racist. And I just didn't know how to cope with it. And I was so alone. I was the only Asian person working in this really white building in the middle of the Midwest in Iowa City. Everyone was so mean to me. And I thought, what was the meanest thing that I could do to these people? And I thought, I had this fantasy, which I never executed, but I wish I did, where I brought a bottle of fish sauce. And if they were like reading a book or something, I would squirt that fish sauce into that book. So suddenly when they are reading a book, suddenly this fish sauce smell like emit from their like a cubicle and all their white building, and it would smell so horrible. And I just had like this hidden, and I fantasize it all the time, like walking through the door, squirting the fish sauce, and then never doing it, which was my biggest disappointment. But if I can think of anything that's the cruelest thing you can do to someone, I guess that would be my way of coping it. And I think walking through, like picking up food, a really nice food or near spice that you would like create dramatic havoc to their life, and you know, pick one like turmeric or something if that's what's bothering them, and just go for it. I just think like fantasizing food, practical things, and not enacting or enacting them, I think it's like can be really harmless, but it helped me cope with my trauma a lot, being the only Asian American working in that building, and probably the only Asian person in their workforce.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry you had to experience that, and I hope that one day you can enact your vengeance. And I don't know, I'm just trying to imagine performance pieces about that. Like, I'm trying to imagine, you know, like all those sanitation bottles, like just the fish sauce, but in the sanitation bottle that you just like go and like spray in random corners of an office building. It sounds amazing. So I'm just like imagining just spraying it in a cubicle or spraying it like in the halls. And so just people would just get a waft of it. And I kind of like, my answer to the question is about leaning into the drama. I like the idea of just thinking back to Dao's title of one of your books, you know, we were meant to be a gentle people. And I also think about, we were also very dramatic. I think about my family, especially on my Vietnamese side, it's just the personalities are huge, like compared to my Japanese side, it's like literally black and white, day and night. And I think there is some power in enacting a kind of beautiful drama as opposed to the drama of the trauma. And so thinking back to rituals as to what Diana was saying, an intro and exit, I love how we had these intro songs at the beginning of our panel, and I just, in my mind, I'm like, that is so Vietnamese. Like, what poetry reading do you come to where all the poets have their own intro song, like super Vietnamese? And I just think in terms of it, like going through our own personal traumas, I think something that's really powerful is to have your own theme song as an intro before you write, having your own theme song when you have an outro, having a song when you wake up in the morning. And that's, hopefully that's very practical. And so I hope that helps answer the question. So you guys in the chat, everybody just think of a theme song that you would wake up to every single morning. And hopefully that will help create your own atmosphere.
Right, so breathe, get a panda, get a bottle of fish sauce, think of a theme song. These are, get some ginger, right? And folks in the chat are talking about ginger whiskey and how we've come full circle for the fish sauce to kind of get through this trauma drama, right? I wanna pull a question from the chat, actually, and I know everyone that's with us, it is 9 and we're actually a little over time, but on the topic of, you know, how this show's a little Vietnamese, I think in the same Vietnamese way, we love long goodbyes, right? So we can say that this is like the beginning of a long goodbye. We're like making our way through Chau Ba Kong, right? And then we'll eventually make it to the parking lot. But Brian asks, earlier y'all mentioned the intense care required in your practice, right? And I think the first question from Goimai had a lot to do with yourselves and how you take care of yourselves. But Brian's question asks, how do each of you go about making the time, energy, space, place, etc., to care deeply for the people in your lives, right, outside of your individual self? Maybe we'll start with Sophia. We go backward.
Oh my gosh. Oh, let me think. How do I take care of the people of my life? I don't know. I think about, kind of going back to the theme of the exhibit, I think about image, standing in for family, the image of a family. And literally, I think about animals a lot. And I think about paintings and images standing for human and also human related losses. So how I take care of my family members, I think about taking care of Panda, who represents all my family members. And I think about also, like growing up, I didn't have really any friends because of my mom's really severe paranoia with the outside world. And to cope with that, I had lots of stuffed animals as my friends. And even now, hi Mom, I even use my stuffed animals sometimes to talk to her because that's something she can relate to. And even if, you know, it's pre-language, like using stuffed animals or using images, and that's how I take care. It's almost like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a childlike thing. I think it's a play-like act, which is like playful act, which I don't think should be limited to just childhood. I think humans ought to play as well. And for me, that's the power in healing a community, playing with each other and giving space for that.
Thanks, Sophia. I'll like.
Do you want to go backwards, or do you want to do?
Or whoever would like to chime in. I want to just quickly say, as you say, the sort of playfulness and the play-like act as a way of healing. I'm thinking a lot about how this is a way that we're playing, right? How I think about the phrase "sam tia chung," right, or common ground, or like a playground that we can all kind of talk about things like trauma, right? And talk about your work and talk about the ways in which a lot of what you all are talking about and what you all are dialoguing about is going to be like, I mean, it's impactful, right? For the people that are here, for the people that will watch this after. And some of the questions are that this conversation will be available after for you viewing too. But maybe I'll pass it on to V, if you have a way, like to, how do you take care of people outside of yourself, your family, your friends, your loved ones?
I can try to answer that question, Philip. I always like fantasize what I think my loved one would want in the future. Like I would prepare some mental thoughts. Like I would sit down with one person, just to imagine that person in that space with me, and then to think of all the conversation that I've had with them in the past, where they said something that they wanted, or they hinted at something and they wanted that very much. And I would try my best to go out my way to give that to them in a way that they don't expect it. So I'll just walk through each person in my head. I'm like, oh, I know this friend of mine who, you know, wanted her book to be more visible to the community. So in my note, whenever I send gifts out, one of her books would be something that I would mail out all to everyone that I know, like a book recommendation that it goes to that person. So anyone who has a book recommendation, so it's like a bookmark for my consciousness, how to process different compartments of my gifting, so that everyone gets a share in different ways, but it isn't always like visible to the to me or even to the person that's receiving it. But it has like this, you know, like when people ask me, you know, what time you want to be interviewed, and I always like put 3 p.m. even though, you know, it's like 12 p.m. here, 3 p.m. in the East Coast, and it just makes the time. So and sometimes it's just hard, just like randomly say 10 a.m. and no one knows it. So I just schedule all my interviews, all my interaction with everyone at 3 p.m. And that helps. And so it helps me, but it also helps the person that is interacting with me to know that there's a frame, there's a regular time frame in which I exist in that physical space. And so a similar note to that would be getting a gift. And that person would be like that 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. And it makes the decision making a lot easier as well. So that I can give to more people at once, as opposed to it occupying just one space. So it's a gift management time in which I can give a lot in a very short period because I have timed it, and I have bookmarked it in a particular. So I'm like not always flipping through my consciousness. Oh, have I give that person something? It's always what is it? It's like when you order Amazon and it just shipped immediately to that person. You know, like if you need to buy soap each month, and it just knows that in 3 months you need more soap. It's basically that, but emotionally and gift wise.
Mm-hmm. That you kind of built in space. I would just answer in a really practical way. I mean, you know, listening, I guess. And then I also think about space as far as like giving people space. And then like, I'm a mother, so like care is like a very pragmatic thing for me. And I've had to have, you know, my own creative life in this pursuit of whatever career is, alongside, you know, having a family. And my son is older now, he's 21. So I've been doing it for a lot of years. So I have a part of myself that is very private and very personal, even though I write in a way that seems to be very personal and I'm writing about my life. I actually keep a lot of my personal life very personal, or just there's a space for it. And even though I write about family and I write about personal things, I have a way in my mind that I keep space from those things. So I actually don't write about things that I don't feel comfortable writing about, or that I don't think are mine. And I also have just ways I do that aesthetically and narratively, just trying to, you know, keeping distance. So at the same time, it's hard to not draw from personal sources. So.
I loved listening to all of you. And I wish we could have a whole panel on just talking about personal life and family. That's a whole can of worms. I'm not going to begin right now. This is also practical, which is we all eat at some point, maybe different points than others. So for me, so much of my joy in life revolves around the kitchen, especially in an estranged time like a pandemic. I schedule cooking sessions with folks. So if a friend reaches out, I say like, hey, do you want to make lunch together on Saturday over FaceTime? And sometimes we cook the same thing. Sometimes we just cook our own thing and we talk about it, you know, because I feel like there's that cliche, but it's also true, like so much love in Asian American families is around food and being in the kitchen. I remember like every time I went to a party, a Vietnamese party, I'm always like washing vegetables. You know, like why are there so many vegetables to wash? Like, and why do I have to wash it so many times? You know, yes, absolutely. Like nobody says I love you. They just ask you if you've eaten yet. And then like, you're never allowed to have an empty plate. So I feel like I take that to a virtual space. And that's how I make space. And then for those for whom maybe cooking isn't a thing, right? Not all of us have time or energy to cook or have access. So I also read plays with people over the phone. You know, we choose a play and then we scan it or something. And then we just like, instead of like somebody reading to each other, we're reading as a group. And it's, I don't know, I enjoy that. So for whatever that's worth, I'll offer that to you all. It's a different way of connecting. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I mean, food is love, right? And when I think about food too, I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I'm pretty hungry, you know, so I'm definitely gonna have to get some after. But I think about, you know, when you know, your day is packed, jam-packed with Zoom meetings, and then you get that like gentle knock on the door if you have the privilege of or fortune of being at home, right? And then there's like a bowl of cut fruit that, you know, kind of manifests on your desk. And I think that to me is, you know, when I feel most loved, right? Without having to say I love you. And I think that's quite beautiful indeed. I think as we kind of wrap up tonight, and as we kind of also think about the moment that we're currently in, right? And how this exhibit came from, you know, being in quarantine and how you all were able to work together. A couple of questions that we have from Jin and Henry are, do you all have, if you all could leave us with, you know, the future female femme-identifying, be it Asian writers or young Vietnamese Asian writers, poets, with some advice, a gift to them from you all, to kind of close us on out, right? Like what would be some advice to give the next generation of folks?
Thanks so much.
I'm just gonna say one word: resist and persevere. 3 words: resist and persevere. I mean, the and was in the word too, but yeah, that I had to learn and I continue to do.
I also have a short answer, and not in opposition, but kind of alongside Diana's response. Something my mom used to always tell me is to be soft. And I used to hate that, like, like, you know, you mean be like soft Asian, like demure? But as I've gotten older, I realized that that's not what she meant. She meant in the power of like, you know, like when you fall down, you should soften. Someone told me once you should soften your body to, you know, prevent breaking your bones. And so I think about that with moving through the world, trying to be as soft as possible. And the way you see things and the way you feel, and allow yourself to be soft. That's my advice.
That resonates with me. I would like, I love both of those answers. And sort of building off of that, I would say, I guess, you know, we can redefine what the paradigms are, or like this idea of what is strength or what is power, like, you know, that it can look different than the dominant structures or the patriarchy or what you're used to, what whiteness suggests. And I would say, like, find your own way, build your own context, build those shapes, whatever that shape is. It might not be like visible or popular, and to make those like for yourself. That would be, I guess, yeah, I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago.
Well, I guess I'm last. So, so in the same note as, I guess the one thing I would advise is that will connect all your Diana's, Sophia's, and Dao's message. Resist and persevere, be soft, and then to build your own context. So I think the thing that combined all that is learn how to play Tiếng Lên, you know. It's a Vietnamese poker. And just because I wanted to play with Vietnamese when I'm traveling, and I'm like, are you Vietnamese? Do you know how to play Tiếng Lên? And they're like, no. And I'm like, now you need to, you know, so that I can play with you, you know. I want to check hiểu. And so that would help me out a lot. I know it's selfish, but if you can learn how to play Tiếng Lên, that would mean a lot to me. So yeah, that would be my Tiếng Lên requires you to resist and persevere, and also be soft, because you can't always play all your hard cards, and then you have to build a context, you know, like if they're playing that card and that card and that card, you just have to know when to land the next card. And I think that's a lot of context.
Thank you all so much for your gifts. And I think we're at that point of the Vietnamese goodbye where we're walking to all of our Hondas parked out in the lot.
We rolled our windows down too.
Everyone's rolling a window down, like, oh wait, did you forget like your leftovers? Thank you all again to all the guests that were able to join us today to She Who Has No Masters. Of course, all of us here are looking forward to the next iteration of the She Who Has No Masters hosted Accented. Before we end though, and before DJ Puzzle plays us out, I do have a couple of plugs to make. Do y'all see that? Do y'all see the follow DVAN slide? Oh yes, okay, great. So I'm here to encourage you all to follow the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network on Instagram at @we_are_DVAN. If you took any screenshots from tonight or took any pictures, please tag us and then we'll repost you. We'll amplify you wherever you are, whoever you are. Also follow us on Facebook, where you can get the latest news about DVAN and what we're up to and all the projects that we have going on. I also want to encourage you all to donate to DVAN if you can at bit.ly/donate to DVAN, so that we can keep putting on programs like this through the pandemic, right? So we can support the artists, the writers, the poets, the cultural producers of the Vietnamese and Southeast Asian diaspora. And you all might see some familiar faces on that slide. And the last pitch that I will show to you all, is a video about DVAN, and also kind of previews our next Accented show. And you heard it here first from me. If you all could join, we'll be on Friday, November 13th, and we'll be on Southeast Asian Diasporic Theatrical Arts. So we will have some pretty incredible guests lined up for that show. So please follow DVAN and for more information and to be plugged in when that show happens.
I'm Viet Thanh Nguyen. I'm one of the co-founders of the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network. We started DVAN 10 years ago to provide a platform for Vietnamese American and Vietnamese diasporic artists, writers, and filmmakers.
I'm Isabelle Pelaud, the co-director of DVAN. We came a long way. We started 10 years ago because we didn't see a story in mainstream society, in history book, in classes. It was nowhere to be seen and to be heard.
Hi, my name is Dao Strom, and I'm a new co-director with DVAN. The Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network's primary mission is to promote stories of the Vietnamese diaspora.
And because our history is marked by displacements, because a lot of our family was spread in different countries before and after the war, we're wanting to bring those stories together. Our story matters, and we have power to change the world.
With your support, DVAN will be able to continue developing its projects. One of these is She Who Has No Masters, the work of the Women's Arts Collective. A second is continuing publications through our online journal, Diacritics, and the third area, creating literary events and writing retreats that bring together emerging and established writers.
We're thrilled to have received an anonymous donation to support our cause. We'd be more thrilled if you helped us match that donation.
With your contribution and with your support, DVAN will be able to continue doing this important work.
And with that, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. Thank you to DVAN, and thank you to all of our incredible guests for being so candid, vulnerable, and real with us all, especially now. Have a great night, everyone, and DJ Puzzle, play us on out.